bearings and represent them on diagrams. In this video, we are going to learn how to write 3-point bearings and represent them on diagrams. So let's learn more about 3-point bearings. In a 3-point bearing, the angles are measured in the clockwise direction from the geographic north. We learned in the previous video that for compass bearings, the angles are measured either from the north or the south, and the direction in which you measure the angle depends whether the other cardinal point is the west or the east. For 3-point bearings, the angles are always measured from the geographic north in the clockwise direction. Now, we saw from the previous video that when we draw our diagram this way, this point here is the geographic north or the north. For 3-point bearings, the angles are always measured from the north, and they are always measured in the clockwise direction. So for 3-point bearings, the angles are always measured from this north in this direction. So we always measure the angles in clockwise direction from the north. What you have to know about 3-point bearings is that the north usually picks, beginning from the north, the angle there is 0. So the angle from this at this place is 0. We learned in the previous video that between the north and this side is 90 degrees. So from 0, when you move in a clockwise direction to this point is 90 degrees. Moving from this point to this point is another 90 degrees. So when you add it to it, you get 180 degrees. Now from this point to this point is also another 90 degrees. So you add it to 180 degrees and you get 270 degrees. From this point here, which is 270 degrees, back to the north will be another 90 degrees. So when you add it, that will be 360 degrees. These values are very, very important. You need to know them because you are going to use them a lot in our studies on bearings. The angles in 3-point bearings are usually written using 3 digits. Let's pick some examples and see how to represent 3-point bearings on diagrams. So the first example, represent the following graphically or represent the following on diagrams. We have 4 questions here. We will take them one after the other and solve it. So we pick the first one, which is 6060 degrees. Because 3-point bearings are written in 3 digits, 60 degrees will be written as 060. So when you see 060, it's the same as 60 degrees. We have learned that to represent 3-point bearings on diagrams, we measure the angle from the geographic north, which is this side, in the clockwise direction. So the angle gives us an indication of how much we are supposed to turn. Here, the angle given us is 60 degrees. So it means that we are supposed to turn 60 degrees from this north in the clockwise direction. So we are supposed to turn 60 degrees in this direction. Okay, and that is exactly what you are going to do. So you draw an arc that represents 60 degrees. Once again, between this side and this side is 90 degrees. So make sure that 60 degrees represents something that looks like 60 degrees. It should be more than half. Your 60 degrees shouldn't be too small and it shouldn't be too big too. Okay, so after you've done that, you draw the line through it as we did in for compass bearings and you indicate the angle there. So the angle there is 60 degrees. Very, very simple. Let's look at the next one. The next one is 112 degrees. 112 degrees. Once again, for 3-point bearings, the angles are always measured in the clockwise direction from the geographic north. So here is the geographic north. So for 112 degrees, you'll be measuring it from this line here in this direction. So you're going to measure 112 degrees in this direction from this line here, from the 0 line. Okay, now let's begin. We know that from 0 to this point here is 90, but the angle we are looking for or we are measuring is 112 degrees, which means that 112 degrees will be in this quadrant, will be in this zone, this area. So it will be between 90 degrees and 180 degrees, because when we move from here up to this point here, it's 90 degrees, but we are looking for 112 degrees. So it will be within this area. So we need to measure the angle left, what will be left in order to get 112 degrees. And to do that is very, very simple. We subtract 90 degrees from this angle that has been given to us. So it's going to be 112 degrees minus 90 degrees. And that is going to give us 22 degrees. What that means is that if we add 22 degrees to 90 degrees, you're going to get 112 degrees. The reason being that when we move from this side to this side, we are at 90 degrees, but we are looking for 112 degrees. So if we want the angle left, we subtract this 90 degrees from 112 degrees, and we just found out that that is 22 degrees. So it means that we have to measure 22 degrees from this 90 degrees, not from here, from 90 degrees. So we measure
èyí ẹjọ́
22
tí a tún máa
degrees
sí
from
ìsàpò
90
yìí.
degrees. So we draw something small here. We draw our line through it. Then we indicate that this is 22 degrees.
Díẹ̀
So
bá jẹ̀
in
mọ̀jà,
actual
ẹ bá
sense,
ti mú kẹ́ ẹ yọ.
we have
Ẹ
actually
bá ti bá
measured
tilẹ̀
from
fún ìṣe yìí sọ.
this line here up
Àti
to this
tilẹ̀ fún
point,
ìṣe.
which is 1,
Okay?
1, 2
That
degrees.
tilẹ̀ point. Ọmọbìnrin náà
But
jẹ́ ní
because we
ẹ̀ṣẹ̀.
are looking for this
Ní
angle,
recently
we
lẹ́nu,
are
ó
going to
dàgbé mi
indicate
láti
it
bá
as
ṣe ní
22
fídíò
degrees.
rẹ̀.
But if you add 22
Recently
degrees
máa
to
sàn tilẹ̀
90
point sí
degrees,
fún.
we are going to get 112 degrees, which was given
Ẹ á tilẹ̀
to
wò,
us.
wọ́n ìsá tilẹ̀ sí
I hope
ìdí.
that is clear. So we add 22 degrees to 90 degrees. You remember how we got the 22 degrees. 112 degrees minus 90 degrees will give us 22 degrees, which means that we have to add this 22 degrees to 90 degrees in order to get the 112 degrees. So we have been able to represent this angle on the diagram. Let's consider the next question. 192 degrees. 192 degrees. Once again, don't forget that we are always measuring from the geographic north, which is this one, in the clockwise direction. So from the north in the clockwise direction. Okay, now let's do that. So if you are measuring from the north in the clockwise direction, that you move from 0 to this side is 90 degrees. We are looking for 192 degrees, so that will not be enough. We move from 90 to this side is 180 degrees. We are still looking for 192 degrees, which means that that will not be enough. But looking at 192 degrees, you can see that it's between 180 degrees and 270 degrees, which means that you will have to add something to 180 degrees in order to get 192 degrees. And that will be the small angle that we are looking for. And how do we find that? That is going to be 192 degrees minus 180 degrees. So this is going to give us 192 degrees minus 180 degrees. Okay. Sorry, minus 180 degrees. And that will be 12 degrees. What that means is that if we add 12 degrees to 180 degrees, you get 192 degrees. So you will measure 12 degrees from 180 degrees. You draw a line through it, then you indicate it as 12 degrees. So from here, when we move from 0 to 90 degrees, we have that here. From 90 degrees to 180 degrees, that will be on this line. We add 12 degrees and we now get 192 degrees to represent the bearing on this diagram. Once again, remember how we got the 12 degrees. 192 degrees minus 180 degrees. Let's move on to the next example. 332 degrees. 332 degrees. Don't forget that we are measuring the angle from the geographic north in the clockwise direction. From the geographic north in the clockwise direction. So let's measure. We begin from the geographic north. So we measure from 0 up to this point, which is 90 degrees. from 90 degrees to 180 degrees, we are still up to 332 degrees. So you're going from 180 degrees to 270 degrees, it's still not up to 332 degrees. So you don't forget that this point here is 0 degrees at the same time 360 degrees. So it means that this new angle, which is 332 degrees, will be between 270 degrees and 360 degrees. That means that you have to add some value to 270 degrees, or you have to add a value to 270 degrees in order to get 332 degrees. How do we find that value? It is 332 degrees. That value will be 332 degrees minus 270 degrees, and that is going to be 62. 62. So it means that we have to measure 62 from 270 degrees. Remember that it is in the clockwise, we are going in the clockwise direction. So 62 from this 62 from 270 degrees. We measure 62 degrees clockwise direction. We measure 62 degrees clockwise direction from this 270 degrees. So 62 is big, so you draw something which is big enough. Then you draw your line through it and you indicate here at 62 degrees.